I'm really excited and I'm really happy to welcome all of you to our third DesignOps Friends of Figma meetup, where we are going to speak about team compositions and file management. And today, I'm more excited because we have Louis on the call.
Absolutely. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for asking me to come here. I do use Twitter mainly for design memes, but occasionally I will put out some interesting information about Figma, about design ops, about systems, about organization. I really do nerd out on process, and I think you do as well. That might be an understatement, considering all the fantastic stuff you're working on. And I'm really excited to see everybody else's opinions about this as well, because the reality is that there is no right answer to all of this stuff. And you can approach all of these situations with 10 different solutions. So today we're going to be sharing a bunch of ideas from our own experiences and our own perspectives, but definitely contribute. This is going to be an amazing experience if you can add your own ideas as well. It'll be great after this session if we could possibly collate all of these ideas and create a resource with all of it as well. So definitely add your ideas. Also add your questions. I'm here to answer questions as well about anything to do with Figma or design more broadly. So just fire away and ask any questions you do have to me and Farid as well.
Thank you, Louis, for such a great introduction. Yeah, my name is Farid Sabitov. I'm leading DesignOps community chapter at Friends of Figma. So I'm really excited to have all of you here. Our goal for today is to help designers, design leaders, design managers, design ops people to structure design deliverables. And today we're going to speak especially about Figma and how we will be able to create the right structure in Figma, structuring our teams, projects, files, and other things to make sure that it's easy to search and easy to find all the information that we have on Figma. So I would like to start with a quick agenda for today's call. We are going to speak about a couple things. So the first one is like a quick introduction as we had before, just finished right now. And the next thing we are going to speak about the products map, the importance of understanding how your products are visualized, structured in your organization. Again, we're going to cover some different setups where we have large organization, product company, or maybe startup. And also we are going to share a couple practices there and a couple things that is important because the same materials will be used in other topic. So the second topic will be team compositions. We are going to speak about the way how the design teams are structured, what are the different practices there, and also the importance of understanding your team compositions, because that will help you to specify your permissions, Figma permissions in your teams and your projects. The next one, we are going to speak about different initiative types. We're going to speak a little bit about design systems for sure. We are going to speak about how product teams are working, what kind of types do we have there, and a lot of things connected to that topic. And at the end, based on all this information that we covered, by understanding our products map, by understanding our team compositions and current initiatives, we will be able to give you some interesting practices, how you will be able to structure your teams at Figma, projects at Figma, and files at Figma. If we will have some time, we are going to share some practices, how to structure your Figma file with your pages and frames, if we will have some time. Great, I see that a lot of people are adding a lot of sticky notes, and that's great. Great.
We just seen a question come in from Kennedy about asking questions. I might just, unless there's a space already, I might create a space for questions over on the left-hand side. And you can add all of your lovely questions over here, and definitely add as many as you want. This session is going to be the best. If you add more questions, ping all your sticky notes over there, get those questions in, and we can handle those as well. Sierra has asked what the meaning of life is. And I think the meaning of life is something like auto layout. I'm not 100% sure, but that's what I read.
Thank you. Okay, Lou, I think we can start with the products map. I can start, and then please share your thoughts as well if you have anything to add.
Let's do it.
So the first thing that we need to understand where we are thinking about the products map is to understand your company size and your company maturity. Here I will just like show a couple like most usual ways of how your products map, your organization could be structured. And here on the left side, I presented the products level that we can use. Why it's important to think about the levels? Because we are going to map the Figma tool capability with the things that we would like to map, what kind of information we would like to map to that structure. So let's start with, as an example, as Facebook, because everyone knows Facebook and it will be easy. It will be easier for us to understand the context here. It all starts with the organization, right? So we are working in Facebook, for example, and that's why we have an organization where we have a lot of different portfolios. Inside different portfolios, we might have a lot of different products. And inside every product, we have different initiatives that are working on specific capabilities or specific features, right? If we are speaking about portfolios, here at Facebook, as an example, we can say that we have one portfolio as social products, the second portfolio as maybe some technical, where we have VR and other hardware in our products inside. If we are going to go deeper a little bit, we have products level. And as we know, Facebook, inside Facebook organization, there is Facebook product and there's Instagram product, right? Inside each of these products, we could visualize current initiatives. So for example, if we are working right now on the chat platform, we could visualize it here. If we are working on notifications, we could visualize here. For sure, for large enterprise companies, these products might be huge, but it will give you a lot of information about how your company is structured, which kind of products are you working on, which kind of portfolios are you having, and like what other teams are working on. So that's some of the ways how you could be more connected and understand what other teams are creating right now. Also, in some cases, for example, if we have specific teams that are working not only on specific capability, on specific feature, but they are working as a part of different platforms, we could create and structure and visualize all these things here as well. Like Facebook as iOS application, right? Another one as desktop website and other things. So again, this activity will help you to structure all your products that you're working on inside your organization. Louis, what do you think about this structure?
I was just going to add another section here as you were talking, that for this particular organization, and actually many organizations, you'll probably have different portfolio products inside your organization which actually need to talk to each other, which means that you may have a situation where you've got organization, portfolio talking to each other, then you've got products which need to talk to the portfolios and all your organization, you have initiatives which possibly cross over to all of those different places as well. For example, you're going to have Facebook Messenger, and Facebook Messenger talks to Facebook product. And as we're all aware, WhatsApp is its own portfolio product, but does definitely talk to Facebook in its own right, whether we know that or not officially. So we need to be in a position as DesignOps, design systems managers, to kind of anticipate those kind of cross-functional, cross-collaborative features and products and initiatives and systems and libraries, to the position where you need to be making calls about the short, mid, long-term planning and future of all of your initiatives. And there's absolutely no problem in thinking in the short and mid-term if it enables you to become successful. When the larger your company becomes, the more budget you get, the more everything becomes sort of meeting-based and planning-based, you're probably going to start thinking about mid and long-term success of those products and those portfolio pieces, which actually means that your life becomes significantly harder because you need to anticipate systems which talk to each other, but also operate independently. And then if we try to relate that back to Figma in itself, that can look like a system that defines everything, or it could look like systems of systems, or many independent systems which actually operate independently, have different billing cycles, have different teams working on them in different places and countries and cities. So there's all these different decisions that we can and should be making as systems designers to think about scaling all of this stuff up. And I think to boil that down into maybe a more digestible and easy to understand situation is, what does success look like? and then work backwards. If success for you is a system which talks to 10 different products, maybe that's where you start. If success to you looks like my designer can drag a button into their user flow, maybe we start there. Then we can start to break that down into those different portfolio pieces and understand whether we need one place for everything or 10 different places. And having those calls at the start enables us to become a lot more considerate to everybody's workflows, everybody's time management, and everyone's processes.
That's true. I love it. Thank you very much. Yeah, we can also add a couple examples here for like much simpler organizations, right? Like
indeed.
the product company. If we are like just a small product company, we don't need to think about different portfolios, right? Different units and other things. So we can make it simple.
Yes.
And yeah, so thank you very much for, I really like your thoughts on that, that it's most importantly, the first question that you need to answer is like, what is the success for us looks like, and how we are going to get there by reorganizing our products and portfolios. Thank you.
And Andy, I don't want to put any undue pressure on anybody as well, because sometimes you don't know what that success is, because maybe you're a new hire or you've just started this team and you have design system ambitions. That's totally fine. That's a good start, good position for you to get the team together, have those conversations in a more transparent way, because what we typically do as designers is go and sit in the corner by ourselves and try and work everything out. Whereas the reality is that in order for us to become successful teams, we need to be working together. And that's not just from designers, it's from engineers, product managers, copywriters, sales and marketing. Everybody is going to ultimately touch these systems that we're playing with. And we need to be very considerate of that, which ultimately promotes a more transparent and open design process, really. That's
true. That's true. We can go into the question section. Maybe there are some. Is DesignOps needed in a team of 2 designers? Question from Artyom. I think we will come back to that because we have an answer in another section. How do you handle dependencies between files when designing a new feature? That's a great question. I think we will be able to answer that at the end because we are going to speak about different file types, right? How does this work for one product but multi-platform?
Yes. So the question that I would ask, or the question I do ask really at that point is, how related are the components in that system? And if the answer is they're the same, then I would keep it very consistent and have one level of library. If you have, so there's another side question to this too, of who is making those changes and who's updating those library files, who's managing them. If it is one person with one style, it makes sense to keep it in one place. If you have a team in different places across the world with different styles, possibly separate them out. If you have a really smooth and slick design team collaboration culture internally, there's nothing stopping you from all working in the same place, but slightly different methods. And that's ultimately the question you're going to be asking yourself is, how many people are working on it? How similar are the components across these platforms? Are these platforms looking to diverge significantly or not in the short, medium, long term? And if the answer is yes, then I'd probably break them down, because my ultimate goal as a systems person is to enable all of the designers to become successful. And what that means is that they don't need to think about components, they need to think about flows and solving problems. If there's a barrier in front of somebody when they're going to use a component in a library, they're probably going to stop using the library and start making their own components. Or even worse, use the library but detach things. So we want to avoid those kind of situations by making the hard work, place the hard work in the design system and make it easier for all of our designers.
Great. Thank you for your answer, Louis. Great. I think we can go to the next section and start thinking about team compositions. We spoke about products map, because if we are trying to reorganize your teams at Figma, it's a good start because that will give you much more sense, much more context about how your current products are structured and visualized. But at the same time, it's important to think about your team compositions. And right now we are going to speak about it more. I have a couple of things prepared here on my another file that I'm going to copy and paste into our file. We can start with a couple of things. We can start with the org structure itself.
Yep.
right? This is really high level topic about like the design culture as well, how what is your organizational structure is, what kind of org structure types there are right now. Also, I'm going to copy and paste a couple things here, and we are going to discuss on top of that.
Awesome.
Great. Okay. I can start with a couple things. So the first thing, I really like this diagram, and we spoke about that in our XOps meetup, where we spoke about the org structure with Patrizia Bertini and Ilya Trigubov, his product ops, and like it was really exciting. So I added the link here if you would like to learn about it more. But here is the structure of what kind of culture different organizations have. Right, so there is on the bottom left corner, there is hierarchy, culture, control. That is completely opposite to advocacy, culture, create. Because here we have more creativity, we have more innovation, it's more dynamic, and we don't have a strict processes and we don't have a strict structure. At the same time, on the hierarchy, culture, structure, there are a lot of control, a lot of coordination, and a lot of stability there. Again, yeah, I agree that create culture is great for startups, for creative agencies, for game industry. Hierarchy, culture, control is good for fintech, finance organizations, or legal organizations, because the price of mistake is so high. So that's why we need to make sure that everything is controlled. Louis, what do you think about this diagram?
Yeah, so I actually never heard of adhocracy before, but it's a fantastic phrasing. It actually very, very nicely describes me as a designer. I'm very much, let's get something out, as opposed to, which is actually contrasting to what I mostly say, because I'm very much process in how I educate people all the time. But the reality is, I think there's enough process that you can employ to get yourself somewhere, and then you can leave the rest until you're a more established team. I've definitely in the past tried to become too structured too soon, which can actually limit you pushing your product forward. And the more time I spend in my design files, the less time I'm spending shipping products and shipping features. So there is always that balance of, do you want to be hierarchical, controlled, structured, using perfect layer naming conventions in your components and styles and tokens and all this sort of stuff? Or do you want to get it to a point where you can kind of actually just move things forward and then come back to it when you're at a position where maybe the team's growing, maybe there's new funding, maybe there's new product lines to support? Because there is always that balance of designers wanting to be perfect, but then budget being constrained. And my sort of method here really is, can we take everything to 80% and then come back to the 20% when we have more resources? Because I think the reality is that most users or customers don't actually care about that final tweak, that final pixel perfection, because they want to use your product and get something done.
Great, thank you for your answer, Louis. We have one question from Maxwell. What is internal versus external focus?
Oh, where on this chart is this one? Hang on a second.
Yeah, it's
on the slide, right? Yeah, sure. So I think internal is basically, can we bake in loads of process to our business and our team? And I think if you think about external, it's more like, how can we offer most value to our customers and our clients? And striking that balance is super hard, but it's something we need to be doing if we want to position ourselves as, I guess, in air quotes, user-centered or user-focused, is that the user doesn't really care how structured your libraries are in Figma. They probably care about how they can use your product. And that's the balance we need to strike, dependent again on what I mentioned earlier about the size of your team, and the size of the business, the scale, the ambitions. It's all going to be impacted massively by those kind of things.
Yeah, that's true. I agree. We can go next and we can speak a little bit more about like different types of org structures. So the first one is more like a formal structure. And this is one of the first steps that organizations are taking, because it's much more easier to create hierarchy or have this power of positions to create, for example, a president, vice president, then we have different directors, C track, B track, A track, and etc., and other things as well. But within the time, we see that it's changing a little bit and it becomes informal structure where we are not speaking about who is your boss, who is your manager, and etc. We are speaking more about who is influencing the most. We are speaking more about leadership, who is the true leader that people are following, right, inside the organization. So that's why we see that right now org structures are changing into informal structure where the power is in influence and power of social relationships. And the final one, I think that's one of this is new, when we are trying to speak not about the power of specific people, but we have value creation structure where people are gathered around their interests. So for example, if we're speaking about large organization, they are gathered around DesignOps or any motion design or any other things that is creating value for the organization. So that's why it's more about communities. And the power is of having the right reputation and power of those with knowledge. So it's not about influence, it's more about the knowledge and having communities inside.
Absolutely. I think that the smaller your team, possibly, the more you're going to be looking at an informal or value-based structure inside the business. My experience in particular has mostly been through those areas, which is there's pros and cons to this. The pros are that you get to touch lots of different parts of the business. The cons are that you become incredibly generic with your skill set. And when you try to apply that to a larger team structure, it's actually very difficult. So I think that people would naturally fall into either a formal structure or a more value-based informal structure. Mm-hmm. That's completely fine because there's businesses in every single avenue here that can hire and you can become successful in. And if we think about what the value of this informal or value structure is, that you would actually be able to touch more parts of the business if you do have that more informal structure, which again is very aligned to that startup mentality or startup mantra of you do what is required to make us successful. Whereas if you think about that formal structure, you're very much going to be the design systems or the design UX designer doing that job in that team, in that department, on that product. And again, completely fine if that's what you want to do. And that's why you need to strike that balance of what do I want to be as a designer? Do I want to be someone who's a hyper knowledgeable person about a particular area of the business? For example, I'm working on an iOS app. That's really interesting to some people, but not interesting to other people, in which case they may want to go down that more informal structure, work at more startup-like businesses to enable you to get that exposure to other places.
Yeah, that's true. I really like your thoughts, Louis. Okay,
we've got a question actually from Kennedy. Kennedy's asked what we recommend the structure is for a 2 to 4 person team, and this is really interesting actually because I think it's kind of related to another point somebody had. I think they were just using the cursor chat where they mentioned or they asked whether DesignOps is something that every single team needs, and I'd actually like to discuss this because I'm not sure, and I think that DesignOps as a thing is relatively new, I guess, and it's still kind of being defined. But generally speaking, it's kind of having your designers' interests at heart, which is almost the job of a designer anyway, but with clients or users. And for a smaller team, so as I said before, I've kind of mostly worked in smaller design teams in my career, and I have gone down the wrong route of trying to become too structured. Whereas sometimes you just need to get work through the door and get it through the pipeline. So for a smaller team, introduce enough process for you to become successful, but ultimately always have in the back of your mind, is this enabling everybody in my team, from designers, product managers, and engineers, to be the best they can be in their job? And the more responsibility we take from that side of things, the more we're going to gain exposure to other parts of the business, the more likely we're going to get promotions, and the more likely we're going to get that new shiny job that we're probably looking for somewhere else.
Yeah, that's true. We can go to another section where I added a couple interesting diagrams that we spoke about that in our second Friends of Figma DesignOps meetup with Patrizia Bertini and others, and Dave Malov, Kristen Skinner, where we were thinking about where DesignOps sits inside the organization. And here I tried to visualize the way how design teams are structured and how they are working with each other, right? So from the beginning, we have a small design team, right? Like experience designer, graphic designer, or user researcher working together. And sometimes there is a lead designer who is working as like, who is becoming a lead of the design team. And the main KPIs for this person is the team performance. And as we can see within these blue bubbles, is like different design teams structured in different ways. And there are design managers who are connected not on the level of teams, but more on the levels of program, connecting different teams, different streams together on common initiatives. So for example, if design manager knows that we have like one really good person, like really good designer who is able to conduct great workshops, discovery workshops, based on the knowledge on which initiatives we are going to work on, design manager could coordinate people and could connect with different initiatives inside the organization. And here we can show that visualize DesignOps, where again, DesignOps could work on different levels, and we're going to speak about that in a second.
We did have a question come in. Somebody asked whether you could define what a design librarian was.
Yeah, design librarian is the person who is working on the design library at Figma. So it's a designer who is responsible for making sure that all design libraries are up to date and all the components are easy to use and easy to search. Design system manager is the person who is connecting not only design, but developers, content specialists, accessibility team, and others. So design system manager is responsible for like releasing the design system. So again, true design system is when design and code is connected, but much broader view on that is that it's not only for designers and developers, it's also for other disciplines, for BAs, I don't know, for all of us.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out here that that is also dependent on the scale and size of the operation, should I say, because whatever terminology we use, design librarian, design systems manager, component manager, whatever they call themselves, that could be somebody who spends all their days inside the design tool. It could be somebody who splits their day between design tool and code, or it could be somebody who is actually living inside the coded components, or all of the above. So I think that depending on how technically capable your design systems people are, that would change what a librarian does with regards to those components and those libraries. You may actually end up in a situation, particularly in a large organization, where you have one person for each individual part of that, and they have their own sub-team. You'll probably have a product manager that looks after the design systems team, engineers dedicated component management as well. So scale, again, is really important to define where that sits and where that starts and where that ends.
Great. That's true. So here we also, I added a couple slides around the DesignOps engagement models, at which levels DesignOps could help. My view on that is that DesignOps is more like a consultant who is helping specific teams, specific streams, or the whole organization to achieve specific goals, right? So if we would like to create a design system, DesignOps person could help to create a design team, could create processes, practices that could help, again, our organization to achieve specific goals. Louis, you added here one preview. Could you please share your thoughts?
Indeed. So this is typically what I tell people at Figma, or clients effectively, how they could look at structuring their teams. And this is kind of very elementary. This is a standard. You can build up from here. But effectively, inside of Figma, when people are starting out, design systems team is the first thing we want to do, particularly if you are new, because it allows you to set up that foundation, and you can invite who needs to be in there, and to make it very intentional that libraries happen over here. then you can have those different teams that we mentioned for those portfolios that we were talking about earlier. So iOS, Android, web, whatever. I would always recommend as well having teams for your different departments in the business. Get your marketing team inside of Figma and allow them to create their presentation decks in there. Get engineering in there to get them on FigJam building their flowcharts. We can really scale up so that everybody is inside that same collaborative space, having interoperable design process. This is sort of the foundational level of teams I recommend people structure, but you can also fork these out. So the more we jump into that organizational structure that you presented earlier, the more teams we may want to create. And the more teams we do or don't create is again going to be dependent on how much work comes through that pipeline. If your iOS team does have many, many epic level products that are being worked on, they may require new teams or not. Again, scale is everything here.
Yeah, that's true. Louis, I have a question for you. I really like your vision on inviting engineering team to Figma, and they could use FigJam files, right, for creating their own sequence diagrams as solution architects and other things, other engineering related deliverables. But my question is if we have an organizational plan and if we will invite different people, but we will invite them only to FigJam files as editors. And because FigJam is for free for the end of this year, will that affect our pricing? If we will invite people only as editors in FigJam file inside our organization?
I think the answer is no, but I would need to check that. I've actually only really been seeing existing editors use FigJam so far. So if you give us a discount. So if you want to have just an engineering team using FigJam, we might need to look at how that is structured, because the billing model will be slightly different. But we can come back to that outside of the call. But I think that typically engineering team, at least from Figma side, are really, really loving FigJam as just an easy way to get ideation on the canvas. And they're actually pushing some pretty neat features, which I can't tell you about, which actually can make it a lot more of a nicer experience too.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I really like that. I totally agree that the marketing team should be a part of the Figma organization as well. Yeah, love it. Another thing that I wanted to, I
was going to say, maybe we can jump over and see if there's any other questions that have popped up.
That's true. What's the best position for FigJam files?
Best position, I think it's laying down. If you could maybe just clarify what you mean a little bit by that question. I'm not entirely sure.
From my perspective, as Louis presented, that we might have different departments inside our FigJam files as teams, as engineer, marketing, sales, and others, and design, product design for sure. FigJam file is another design deliverable, but it's more collaborative. And it's really easy to onboard other people. So that's why I think it could be at any team. It's based on the things that you would like to do. If you would like to do a quick workshop, FigJam file is the perfect option. And it could be in any department, in any team, in any project.
Indeed. I think that positioning as in what's part of the design process, I would actually look at it in the kind of collaborative, non-design piece of that puzzle. So what I could do as a designer, I could invite my copywriters or product managers into that file, paste in my design work like so, and then we could collaborate on that. If you just look over to the right-hand side of that screen, just a little bit, there's a frame in here. What we could do is we could come in, we could highlight certain parts and say, this isn't correct logo. The copywriter could come in and make changes to the copy. So this probably could say best, and you can also respect auto layout properties in here too. So if it was an auto layout button, for example, that will still be growing and shrinking as you're working inside that design, but it does allow you to collaborate on there without disrupting the original design. So it's at the point where I think you need to get feedback on something. You can draw that line in the sand and you can say, we want to stop here, get some feedback before we take it to the next level.
That's true. I was thinking that the marketing team, the first feedback that they will say here at this point, they will ask, make the logo bigger.
Exactly.
Great. Yeah. Um, Another questions that we have, we have a couple questions around, is DesignOps needed for a team of 2 designers? And I think another frame that I would like to put into our FigJam file is this one, where we are going to speak about that a little bit. So here I wanted to present you a couple of things and how different design teams can be structured, right? So it all starts with, like, if you are just a startup, you have a team of experienced designer, visual designer, and maybe motion designer or UX copywriter, right? And you are gathering around as a specific team. Within the time, we see that different designers are working on the different initiatives. So that's why we need a lead experienced designer who will able to make sure that everyone is happy, the team performance is pretty high, we don't have any other questions, and everything is resolved quickly. In some cases, right, after like couple months, your startup got the investment and you're increasing the amount of designers in your organization. In some cases, you might have not only one design team, but 2 design teams. So that's why you might have like more advanced structure, more advanced design team, like 2 design teams, right? And in that case, we need design manager who will able to also analyze and quickly understand the current initiatives roadmap, understand the team compositions, what kind of resources we will need for the upcoming quarter. Do we need to hire more people, or do we need specific extra skills like motion designer or any other people? When design organization grows, again, right, just one stream might not be enough because we have different products that we also need to focus on. And that's why we see that at some level, there might be larger design teams where we have not only like one design manager, but 2 design managers reporting to design director. And in that case, I saw a couple questions about, like, do we need a design ops person when we have a design team of 2 people, right? The answer here is it depends on your current challenges and current goals. If you would like to, if you're struggling and your design team currently is not capable of creating research database or adapting to remote practices, like adding new tools or new processes, how we will be able to work efficiently, in that case, yes, designers person could help. But in most of the cases, if you have pretty senior lead experienced designer, this person could set up such processes and suggest couple practices and tools as well. Here, what I want to show is that DesignOps is a role that works on the different dimensions. So as we mentioned before, as Rachel Posen provided in her preview, in her image, in her diagram, that we have different engagement models. We can work as a part of specific team, right? If there are some problems, if this design team is struggling to add new practices around usability testing, right? How we could do that efficiently, how we could recruit the right participants for our interviews and other things. Also, in some cases, DesignOps person is able to work on the level of specific streams, right? If we are speaking about that currently design team is struggling with prioritizing all the work and there are a lot of demand from different product teams that are requesting design help, DesignOps at this level is able to specify the right practices of how to integrate design work into agile processes, into agile ceremonies, into Jira, for example, as issue tracking system. And at the same time, DesignOps could work on more strategic level where, for example, the design director right now facing some issues with hiring people, right? And DesignOps person needs to work on the market recognition, on creating our own design culture and focusing on internal communities, or maybe creating more effective onboarding flow for our designers and making sure that everyone, like the onboarding time takes very little time, or designers are struggling and our attrition rate is pretty high because people don't know how to grow inside the organization. So that's why DesignOps could help you with the skill metrics, competency metrics, creating such career path and making sure that everyone is happy. Also, based on these discussions, I also added a couple focus areas here at the left side. Again, we all discussed that in our previous meetup at Friends of Figma, so you can join or you can listen, you can watch our previous sessions where we spoke about it more. So hopefully I was able to answer your question, but what I wanted to add more is that also design systems, right? Everyone loves this topic. And here on the left side, we have product stream. Teams, designers who are working on the products, right? We have DesignOps who are working on operations, and we have shared services. Inside shared services, you might have some unique skills, unique people who are helping different teams and engaging with different projects, right? Like UX copywriter or accessibility specialist. Also, inside shared services, we all know that design systems might be a part of shared services because the deliverables of design system is used across different product streams, different product teams. And here we might have, again, a little bit different structure. On the right side, I wanted to share with you the governance models for design systems, solitary, centralized, and federated. And also, like, you can start with solitary governance model, where just one specific person is trying to create a design library or UI kit in Figma or a true design system. The next phase is to become a centralized, where we have a dedicated team. And in such view here, we have more like a centralized governance model because we have dedicated team who is working on design system. But like the ideal scenario is to have federated model where not only design librarians and design system managers are able to contribute to the design system, but everyone is able to do that. I have a couple of practices how to do that. Is, again, if you have a lot of different teams inside Figma, different products, different teams working on different products, you can create one specifically dedicated team only for design system. And inside this design system team, you can create 2 or 3 projects. One project is called Global Library, where we have our design system. And also another project called Product Libraries, where product teams, if they want to contribute to the design system, they could contribute to your Figma team. So again, in that case, everyone will see that we have not only one global design library, but also some product libraries, and everyone is able to contribute there. And again, speaking about the current team compositions, you can standardize and specify different team permissions in your organization. So hopefully this information inspired you on thinking deeply more about a couple different things about like team compositions, shared services, DesignOps, and other things.
Awesome. That was really nice. There was a question that came in from Sierra, and they asked whether DesignOps should only be managed by someone who is a senior or who has significant experience. And the answer is, I'm not sure. I think that somebody who is naturally organized and operationally minded doesn't necessarily have to have 15 years of design experience. I think ultimately, if you're a good organizer, you're good at project management, good at making people successful and happy, and you are really comfortable talking to people, can operate in individual, multiple departments across a business, can communicate really effectively, you're going to be good at design operations. It's effectively somebody's job to make other people on that team as good as they can be, regardless of whether that's with career aspirations or with issues with their manager, or they want to get a promotion, or they want to go on some training. It's about facilitating all of these things and enabling that person to do that. So regardless of whether you have had 2 years design experience or 10, you may be excellent at it. The thing that is worth considering is that design operations is typically a role that only really occurs at the larger sized businesses, which means that it's not going to be an easy thing to jump into. So that's probably where the experience does naturally lead you to that kind of position, because you have possibly been a product designer for 5-6 years and have made a transition to a design operations role naturally, because you've possibly been in that startup, seen them up to 10, 20, 30, 40 designers, and have become that person that's taken on the reins of looking after that team. In a smaller team, the design operations side of things is probably looked after by the most senior person in that team because they've seen more things, but it doesn't have to be. And I think that I've answered many questions today by saying the scale is very important. And if you're working in a team of 2 people, you're probably sharing that resource. And ultimately, the success of both of those people is going to be dependent on each other. Whereas if you get to that situation where you've got 20 designers and there's a design operations person, that's not on your burden to look after the individual team members. You obviously want to, because you want a positive design culture across the business. But the more formal side of design operations can be managed by somebody as a full-time job. Just how you have people operations inside a business, just how you have financial operations inside a business, design operations in its own right can be and should be a full-time role in the larger side of things.
That's true. Thank you, Louis. Great. I think we can go to the next chapter, but I just wanted to finalize these team compositions. So as we discussed the products map, this is the activity that you can conduct inside your organization, inside yours. You can start with your own team or with your own stream, a bunch of teams, right? Or your own organization, where you're just like inviting a couple people who are interested in that topic and trying to visualize the products map, because this deliverable will be used in our next steps. On the next step, team compositions, one of the activities that you can conduct within your organization is to visualize different team compositions. And I added a couple master components that you can use for your purposes as well. You can do it in FigJam. You can just like strictly copy a couple things here and add to your own FigJam file and start collaborating with your designers, with your design managers or design directors. But here it's important to visualize what kind of teams do we have right now, right? Provide names and specify the teams. Also, right now we are visualizing only designers, but also at some points you would like to visualize not only designers, but the whole team as well. That will give you much broader view on the way how teams are structured. The next thing is initiatives types. Let me go back to my file, and I will just paste here a couple things. Speaking about different initiatives type, I think the preview from like Louis is like really great because it explains a lot what kind of initiative types you might have. Design system as shared services, right? Where you are creating a design system for all the product teams. You might have different teams, different product teams that are working on specific features. Here, what I want to share is that we have design system as initiative type. And also speaking about design, we might have different levels of the design. The first level is the service design. The second one is the product design. And the third one is just support. Working on some improvements internally inside the product, improving UX patterns, improving the experience as well. The difference between support and product design is that in product design, we are conducting some user research activities, like speaking with our customers, conducting interviews, in-depth interviews, conducting usability sessions where we prepare some concepts and we would like to get early feedback. As you can see here, the maturity of this product design initiative type is a little bit much higher because we are not just creating things, right? We are doing concepts and testing that with our customers. The third level service design teams is much more advanced and much more mature, where we are understanding the market. We are creating really detailed experience maps for every journey. We know all the details and we are doing a lot of research activities, a lot of research in advance to make sure that we are able to cover all the things and make really valuable product. There is the first type of like the product design is innovations, and I haven't seen a lot of them because it's pretty unique when specifically the dedicated team is working only on innovations, and innovations is not the same as ideation phase in design, right? Where we are trying to come up with ideas for specific problem. Innovations is more about understanding the current technologies and how we could adapt such technologies to some use cases that we used before to come up with some new ideas, with some completely new products. Louis, do you have any thoughts on the initiative types?
Yeah, so I think that these could also be quite aligned to the product or team structure that you have. You may actually have an innovation team as opposed to an innovation designer, and that's a broader, probably replicating the design team structure of designer, engineer, product manager type squad thing in the innovation department. So an innovation designer is possibly just another designer, but working on a particular type of project internally to that business, which is either going to be released or not. And I think that another side of it also is things like internal tooling. So Facebook, for example, using that business that we were talking about earlier, has entire internal teams working on internal products. They wouldn't necessarily be used by you and I, but are massively important to the business. And that as a structure or an initiative in itself is super important. Difficult to describe because it's going to be different to every business, but you're most likely going to be having those designers, those copywriters, product managers, engineers, etc., which all form up to that innovation or internal product, or however you want to look at it, type of structure inside that business as well. But generally speaking, I think you're always going to be finding those handful of job types, regardless of what business you're in, what you're working on, whether it's an in-house designer or an agency. You typically have a similar structure. Obviously, the output is very different and the pace is very different and the structure of your files and everything like that is different. But typically, we want to align to a certain standard, which is actually very difficult because, as we all know, design job titles are different according to industry, according to country, according to region. So having that sort of central standard is useful, but at the same time, incredibly hard to bring down into one centralized cadence or rhythm of managing job titles across the world. I think something that surprised me a few years ago when I was applying for jobs is that I was looking at product design jobs, and some people were calling them UX design jobs, and some people were calling them design jobs, and some people were calling them web design jobs. And I was thinking, I have no idea which one is appropriate. They all have very similar job descriptions, but the reality is that when you get people building teams and building structures based off staff design, and that's the one I was talking about before. So when you get people who are hiring teams that maybe aren't up to date with what a modern day designer works on, maybe they're still thinking 5 years ago when it was called this, you're going to struggle to build teams because the designers now are looking for this job title and it's completely different. So you're going to fail to find the right candidates for your job.
That's true. That's true. So the last thing that I want to share is a couple of practices on how you can connect all these deliverables from the previous activities into one place. So here I just wanted to share that when we are thinking about the way how we could structure our deliverables, it's important to understand the products levels, right, as we discussed before, and the technical tool limitations. I mean, structure, how it's structured, if we're speaking about Figma or any other things as well. Here on the left side, we visualize the organization, portfolio, product, initiative, releases, capabilities, user stories, and acceptance criteria. We are not going to speak about this part. We are going to speak about the way how you are able to finally name your team properly to make sure that it's easy to search and easy to navigate through all your Figma teams. Here's an example. There's two options personally that I like. Is like option one with presenting only product names inside Figma team, right? And the second one is to add also the initiative names that, again, mostly used in large organizations where we have a lot of different products and different initiatives working at the same time. Here I will just like go back into our example as Facebook. So we have Facebook as an organization. We have portfolio called social. We have product as Instagram, and we have initiative as notification center. Again, based on your organizational maturity model and maturity level and your size as well, and complexity of like the goals that you're trying to achieve. Now, here's one of the examples. The organization name at Figma, if we're using organization plan, is Facebook. The team name, we can combine a couple information and use just abbreviation of some of the things. Like social, if we have just like 4 or 5 portfolios, it will be easy to understand for everyone that the first letter S means social. The second part, Instagram. And again, by using just abbreviation, having I, we are able to visualize that. This is a part of social and Instagram as a product. And the name of the initiative as well. So that's the way how you are able to name your team. And here on the right side, I want to show one of the examples how you are able to provide your team descriptions. I think it's really important to not to forget to use all Figma capabilities and use team descriptions, project descriptions, again, to make our life easier and providing all the information that is required for others. Here, I added one of the templates that I'm using the most that you can use that to explain your current initiative. You can visualize your current product inside which organization, inside which portfolio and product. You can also map different products if this feature or this initiative is touching different products at the same time. It's important to visualize stakeholders. So if we have some questions from the text perspective, we know and we have the name or email here on the team description at Figma, and the same as design. Specifying key designer as a contact point and some wiki and some links to the wiki, Jira, or Slack that will help others to quickly navigate through all your teams. Louis, I know that you have a hard stop in 2 minutes.
Yes, indeed. There's just a couple more things that I wanted to talk about. I've added some notes up the top here for the way that we're breaking down these files into effectively release numbers is actually really important for me, at least when I'm talking to people who find themselves in situations where their files are massive. It's because we're trying to do too much inside one place. And it's very easy actually to treat a file like a project. And that's where we hit a barrier of not only performance, but also from a management perspective and getting designs through that pipeline. So I'd always encourage people to look at whether you're using Jira or Trello or Asana or whatever, and think about, can I actually make my file that ticket? And then keep my work in another place, which I reference. So when I think about user flows, I'd always have a different project for the final user flow somewhere, and then have an individual file, which is the new feature that I try and map onto that individual project itself. It just makes it a lot easier to manage. So I'm just going to paste something in here, which may or may not make sense to a lot of people. But I'm going to paste it down here anyway. Well, that's big. So the way that I look at these project structures here is I'd have a project called shipped and a project called feature. And the shipped, basically the full user section, the full section of that product, for example, an account. And then I'd have a file for user profile. So that would have my entire user flow for that user profile section in our account. There'd probably be another file for settings, another file for notifications, or whatever it is that is significant. When I'm starting to think about building that work inside my designs, I'd create a new file that is specific for a piece of work. For example, adding a new card scanning feature to my user profile template, which is over here, would be its own file, and it would be in its own project. So we can separate the work in progress work from the final work. And then we know that all the final work is not going to get muddled with, people won't get confused with it. Developers won't be looking in the wrong place. So as long as we keep those separated, it makes it a lot easier to maintain. And just another aspect of this too, is that when we start to think about our individual files for things like releases, the added complication here is that we may start to think about things like branching. So as branching becomes more of a natural workflow for designers, we may end up with one file, but different branches for that staged release cycle. And it requires a lot more governance and a lot more planning to make sure that's successful and we don't get merges of work that isn't supposed to be in that place. But it is definitely worth considering as we try and scale up and reduce the amount of files that we're creating. A branch could effectively become a new version in a file format.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you, Louis, for attending and speaking together with us, sharing all your thoughts on the ways how to structure team compositions and file management. Thank you for your time. It was a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you everybody for coming. I hope that was useful. We did cover a lot in that hour. Please feel free to follow up with any questions with both of us on Twitter afterwards. We're always here to help.
True. Yeah, if you will have some questions, please ask them in Twitter. That will be a great place. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Louis.
Cheers.
Cheers. So the only thing that I want to share also is I have a couple of things here when we are speaking about different file types. As Louis already mentioned, that we might use different ways of naming conventions and adding, for example, feature or shipped name into our project that could help us to structure all our deliverables as well. Another thing that I want to share here, I will put that on the side, is that if we're speaking about, again, if we are trying to standardize the way how our design teams are working, it's important to visualize all the different types of Figma files. And also for each type of Figma file, it would be great if you were able to create a template for designers. So if they would like to create a new release with some pages inside, with some table of contents as component inside, with some information that will speed up their process, you could do that. But here I just wanted to share a couple different types of Figma files that you can specify inside your design team. As Louis mentioned, it's important to map your design deliverables with the Jira tickets. Also, another one is to map your projects or to map your Figma files as to releases or sprints. It depends on the way how you are working inside your design organization, like inside your product team. Also, if we are speaking about usability testings, for sure, it's important to make sure that for usability testings, we are not using the original files. We are just copying and pasting all the prototypes into separate files. And again, we can add some naming to the naming convention, some like validation number. And if you have user research database, or like you have a researcher person who did that inside your organization, you could map every Figma file to the number of like validation that you did inside your team. Also, there are a couple of files like ID bank. So if, again, we don't have unlimited budget everywhere, right? So that's why not all our IDs can go to the development. So that's why ID bank is a separate file that have all these concepts that we couldn't add into our development, right? And this is the place where you can capture all these things. And the same with the challenges. So for example, if you see some bugs, visual bugs, or some problems with the experience, or you did a heuristic evaluation on your specific feature or specific product, you could store everything here as well. The same as visual research, this is like done in the beginning. Or also, you can create inside your project your internal library that could be stored here. What I want to say is that there are a couple practices on how to structure all your files inside projects. I really like the approach of time-based. And so for every time-based practice, so what I mean is that in every team, we have two types of projects. One project is called internal materials, where we have ID bank, challenges, visual research files, or internal library that is like, they are always living, right? We can always come back to them and work on them. And there are time-based projects. So you can create a project called with the name of the release and store all these time-based deliverables there. So conclusion is that you can structure all your projects based on one of them is like internal materials, and the second one is time-based materials, where you can map and add all your Figma files there. And the last thing inside how you could structure all your pages, again, here it's also important to map all your Jira tickets. If you're working on the user story or on Epic or on a specific capability, you could add Jira tickets. Why? Because your developers or product managers or BAs, it will be easier for them to navigate through all your pages. I added a couple practices here, so hopefully that will be useful for you as well.